That was longer than I wanted, Linda. Well, thank you, and I appreciate that introduction. And before I get started with what I wanted to talk about this morning, let me say this. I've gotten more out of CSU than I've given. And this community in this region has gotten more out of CSU than we have given CSU. I was telling someone this morning that my sense of what this university has done for this region and this state, especially Columbus, Georgia, and Phoenix City, is that it has created a real middle class. When I graduated from high school in 1959, we did not have a large middle class in this Columbus or Phoenix City. And the graduates of this university over the last 58 years, soon to be 60, I guess 60 this year, is populating all these businesses now and has created an ability for them to grow here instead of going somewhere else to grow. So hopefully all of y'all will have an opportunity to stay here and have a job and help expand that middle class. Thank you again, Linda, for that introduction. And let me say what Linda asked me to do was to, first of all, give you a sort of a background on my journey in life. And I don't know if that's going to be all that helpful or not, but it may give you some idea about maybe the possibilities in your life, or maybe some that you don't know that you got. And then what I'd like to do after that is about 20 years ago, I started writing down lessons, life lessons that I've learned, things that have helped me as I've moved along the track of life. And they're up to 21, so don't worry, I'm not going to go over 21 with you this morning. But I do want to leave you with maybe 3 that could maybe help you as you go through your college career and then on into your work career. And then I want to leave you with a little story about making a difference, because I feel like most of us in life want to make a difference at the end of the day. So let me start. How many of y'all grew up in Columbus? A good many of you. How many of you are from Georgia? All right, and then from Alabama. Okay. Well, I was born here in Columbus and raised here, and I went through the public school system here. I lived in a public housing project in Jordan City. It was a Peabody Apartments is what it's called. I lived there from when I was 6 years old till I was 19 when I got married. I went to Jordan High School. Jordan High School, for those that don't know about it, was a vocational high school. And you went there to learn a trade, basically. If you were a boy, you generally went through one of the shop programs. If you were a girl, you went through a transcription and a bookkeeping and a typing program so that you'd prepare yourself to be working in offices when you got out of there. I chose to go through the machine shop program. The only reason I chose that was not because it was fascinating to me. It was because the teacher had a reputation that if you got through his program, he'd get you a job at the end of when you graduated. So I went through the machine shop program there, and when I graduated from high school in June of 1959, sure enough, he got me a job in a machine shop. And I did what every red-blooded American male would do when they got a job, first job. I went out and bought me a car. and I got in debt. And I obligated myself to about half of what I took home a month to pay for this car. And I started to work in the machine shop, and I was making about $1.20 an hour, which was 20 cents an hour more than minimum wage, which I thought was pretty good as a starting salary at the time. So I worked there about 2.5 months, and then an event took place which literally changed my life. I thought it was for the worst at the time, but as it turned out, it was very fortuitous for me. The United States Steelworkers went on strike. The Steelworkers Union was negotiating with the steel manufacturers, and they couldn't come to an agreement, so they decided to go on strike. So all of them steel that was being manufactured in the United States came to a halt. And as you can imagine, with no raw materials, the machine shop had nothing to do, and they laid off all the workers. And I was one of them. And so I immediately started looking for a job. I had about enough money to pay for 2 car payments. So I figured I had about 2 months to find another job or hope that the steel workers would go back to work and that I could go back to work in the machine shop. Well, the steel workers didn't go back to work, and I was out very hard looking for a job. And I happened to run into my high school principal, who said, "Jimmy, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm out looking for a job, Mr. Tolliver." And he said, "Well, I thought you had one." And I told him my situation, and he said, "Well, give me your phone number." And I gave him my phone number, and really the next day he called and said, "Jimmy, they need a male teller at Columbus Bank and Trust Company." Now you can't say male teller anymore. You can't. That's not. But back then, they had a lady down there, honestly, who had gotten pregnant, and she was having to leave work, and the branch manager did not want another lady who was going to get pregnant, so they wanted a male teller. I don't know if I've ever told that part of this story before, but. So I said, "Mr. Tolliver, you don't remember it, but I went through the machine shop program at Jordan." He said, "Well, I don't really care what you went through at Jordan. You need a job, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, go down there and apply for that teller's job." So I did, and I got the job, and I went to work at Columbus Bank Trust Company as a teller. I did not think I was going to be there that long. I really felt like I was going to go back to the machine shop as soon as the steel workers went back to work. But they really didn't go back to work for a good while. I went to work on October 1st, 1959 at CB&T, and they didn't go back to work until the first of the year in 1960. Well, while I was out looking for a job, I'm going to digress a minute. While I was out looking for a job, I decided to go to CSU, or Columbus College. I signed up for one subject at night. It was English. It was in the Shannon hosiery mill. And I got my job at the bank, and I continued going that quarter at the time, and I made a D. I thought, well, I'm not sure this college business is going to be for me. And anyway, I'm going back to work as soon as the steel workers go back to work in a machine shop. So I dropped out of CSU and just devoted my time to working at CB&T and waiting on going back to work. Well, when the steel workers did go back to work, I had decided that I really liked what I was doing in the teller's cage at CB&T on waiting on customers. And I decided not to go back to the machine shop and stay there. And it was about that time that I also decided that I'd better give this college another chance. And so the next fall I re-enrolled and started in the fall of 1960 of really trying to get a degree at CSU. And as Linda said, I worked, all of my schooling was at night. And it took 4 years to get a 2-year degree. But I did get that degree in 1964, and what she didn't say was that at CSU at the time, we also had a University of Georgia off-campus program here, which said you could continue from 2 years up to your 3rd year. And then you had to go on campus to get a 4-year degree. So I continued taking classes at Columbus College through the University of Georgia off-campus program. And pretty much all they were offering were psychology courses, to be honest with you. And if I'd ever gotten a BA degree, I'd have had a minor in psychology, because I took a lot of psychology courses. But that's how I got at the bank. And let me digress another minute, because I think this is something maybe you students deal with sometime. When I got out of high school, I was a very, very shy individual. So shy that I did not want to go into a restaurant, because I did not want to have to walk through the restaurant to a table. Just didn't want to expose myself. And the very thought back then of me getting up in the front of a group like this speaking would have kept me up for 2 or 3 nights before I had to do that. And it still does, by the way, y'all. I mean, I wasn't sleepless last night, but I got to tell you, when I went to bed, I thought, is what I'm going to say relevant to these folks? Can I even say it in a way that would make it relevant? And I got up early this morning to make sure that I had my thoughts in order. So I'm not totally over that fear, but I will tell you it's a fear that you need to overcome if you're interested in being a leader and being successful as a leader. Because you got to be able to communicate. So I digressed. So from there I started progressing in the bank. And folks have asked me a lot of times, Jimmy, did you ever think that when you started as a teller that you could wind up being the president of Synovus or the chairman of the board of Synovus? And my answer is absolutely not. That was the furthest thing from my mind. And I tell folks now, when I'm asked to speak at the bank or at Synovus, don't think in those kind of terms. My thinking was, when I was a teller, I wanted to be a head teller. That's the next job. And I wanted to be such a good teller that when they got ready and needed a new head teller, they'd pick me. And I was a head teller. And when I was a head teller, I was wanting to get into the management. And I wanted to be the best head teller I could be, so that when they was comparing me against everybody else, they'd say, let's pick him. And then I did move into management, into the audit department, which nothing against auditors, but that was not my cup of tea. But I wanted to do it so well that when they got ready to move me somewhere else, they'd move me out of there into another job. And they did. We had a death in CB&T back then. It caused a whole whole turnover of people, and they had to move me into what was then the installment loan department, which was lending money to individuals for car loans, purchases. And all. By the way, I did pay off that car loan in 24 months and got out from under that payment. And also, when they gave me the job at the bank, I was making less than I was making it in the machine shop. I was making $175 a month. So anyway, that was been my thinking from the day I started. I want the next job. If I concentrate on what I'm doing, then I may get the next job. I wasn't worried about who was the president when I was an installment loan officer. I was worried about how can I get out of the installment loan department and being a branch manager or an assistant branch manager. So my movement through that organization has been doing just about every job, but moving up a little bit at a time, to one day that I arrived at being the president, which heaven knows how that happened, other than the fact that I was trying to work hard and I was trying to treat people right. And that's something I'm going to talk about. So anyway, that's been my journey. I retired in 2004 as the chairman of the board of Synovus Financial after 45 years of work. And I've served on the board at Synovus Financial until 2012 and on the board of Total Systems until this time last year. Still love both companies, still involved in both companies as a shareholder, and still involved with the W.C. Bradley Company on their board, and still involved in this community. But now let me turn to 3 life lessons. The first one, if you want to be successful, then I think the first thing you have to learn is how to treat people. And I say it this way. I've told my children this. If you work hard and treat people right, good things will happen to you. And most folks think when you say treat people right, you're thinking about being kind and courteous and those sort of things. And I'm talking about that. That is what I'm talking about, part of it. But what I'm really saying is that you got to care. You got to deeply care about people. And to do that, you got to invest yourself in people. I mean, you got to invest your time in people. You got to genuinely care. A lot of folks do it superficially, and y'all know this. And I guess the best example I know of that was told to me by Bill Hurd Jr., who used to have the Chevrolet dealerships here. Bill was telling me the story about how he and his wife Sarah were in Washington visiting then the senior senator from Georgia, Herman Talmadge. And Senator Talmadge was having a reception. And they had a receiving line. And Bill and Sarah was in the receiving line going down to get to speak to Senator Talmadge. Senator Talmadge had a guy standing behind him that was prompting him on who was coming through the line, so he could pretend that he knew him and could speak the name. Well, Bill tells it this way. When he got there, he said, Senator Talmadge was glad to be here. Senator Talmadge took his hand out and said, Bill, we're glad to have you here. He said, by the way, how's your dad? He said, well, he died 10 years ago. He said, well, fine. Tell him I said hello next time you see him. And passed him on down the line. And that is the, that. I'm sure he was thinking he was going to make this Bill Turd Jr. feel good by mentioning his dad. But then you realize that's just superficial. It was not really genuine. So you got to genuinely care about folks. And a leader, I think, if you're going to get folks to follow you, they got to know you care. And I guess the best story I heard about that was at the first Jim Blanchard Leadership Conference we had here on campus, some 10 years ago now, I guess. We had a speaker that Jim and them lined up, a lieutenant general named Honore, who was the general that President Bush sent to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina to help bring order to that chaos down there. And he did. Unfortunately, this conference was on the first anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and President Bush wanted to go back to New Orleans and have all those folks there to celebrate the fact that they'd begun fixing New Orleans. I don't know they hadn't fixed it by then. So General Honore sent his command sergeant major to fill in for him. And my first reaction is there's a far cry from a lieutenant general to a command sergeant major. But this guy was ramrod straight. He said a lot of things, but the one story that he left me with was that he said, I'm a command sergeant major. These are the three things I look for in a leader. The first one is I want to know that he's competent, that he knows what he's doing. The second one is that I want to know that he'll tell the truth. We are asking the Army to do a lot of things, especially dangerous things. And I want him to tell me the truth, what the situation is. And then the third thing, and the most important thing to me, is I want to know that he really cares about me and my family and about what's going on with me and my family. And if he cares for me and he's competent and he'll tell the truth, then I'll follow him anywhere he wants me to go. So care and treat people right. If you want to be successful, I think you're going to have to do that. The second thing is you're in school to hone your aptitude. And you want to have the best aptitude that you can have. You want to get out of here with the best grades you can possibly have as well. That's sales in the marketplace. But I'll tell you what is just as important as a good aptitude, and that's a good attitude. A good attitude adds energy to an organization. Good attitudes are selfless. Good attitudes don't point fingers and make excuses for what you can't do. Good attitudes are flexible. Good attitudes add to the organization. Bad attitudes does exactly the opposite. And I can tell you, if somebody's got a great aptitude and a bad attitude versus a guy or a person that has a great attitude and maybe a mediocre aptitude, I'll take the good attitude and mediocre every time. Because a bad attitude will infect an organization. And the best thing about an attitude? Either one of them. As opposed to aptitude. Because we all may have limitations on our aptitude. The best thing about a good attitude or an attitude is you can make that choice every day. What kind of an attitude am I going to have today? You can't choose your aptitude necessarily. You can improve it, but you know, God gave you basically a limit to what you can do with your aptitude. And then the third thing, and somebody sent me this little ditty one time, and I thought it summed up the secret of success so succinctly. And that is, if you want to be successful in anything you do, remember these three words: and then some. Everybody has an expectation. You know, most folks, when they go to work, say, what do you expect of me? And they get well, I want you to be here at 9, I want you to work at 5. I want you to do these certain tasks. And everybody wants to do what's expected of them. There's a few folks that does what's expected of them, and then some. That's not just in work, by the way, y'all. That's in your marriage. That's in any partnership. If anybody is in here married and you think you got a 50-50 partnership with your husband or wife, you're wrong. That will not work. And I can tell you, as a banker, I have seen a lot of business partnerships that they thought they were a 50-50 partnership. And 90% of the time, and it may be higher than that, they break up generally over a discussion about I do more in this organization than he does. This is a 50-50 partnership, and I'm working harder than him, or I'm contributing more than him. And if you go into a partnership thinking that it's a pure 50-50, it is absolutely going to fail. So I think you go into anything, if you don't feel like you got to add and then something to it, then you're subject to not. I would say your homework, your friendships, your marriage, and then your work, and anything you do, you ought to do what's expected of you, and then some. Now let me sort of wind this up with this notion about making a difference. That's what I've wanted to do most of my life. And by the way, I'm not talking about an Abraham Lincoln kind of difference, or Dr. Jonas Salk kind of difference. I'm just talking about that when I am given a job, when I get finished with it, I want somebody to say, he made a difference for that. Whether it's a volunteer job or whether it's a job at Synovus. You know, my relationships with people, my friendships, I want my friends to think that I make a difference in their life. You know, I would want them to think that they make a difference in my life. So in case you're thinking, well, that's great for the retired chairman of Synovus to say, I can't make a difference. You can. You can make a difference with the person sitting next to you today, if that's what you want to do. You can make a difference in your classroom with your other classmates, if that's what you want to do. And I would tell you that you ought to. Let me wind this up with a little story about that. It's one of my favorite stories. And it's called the starfish story. There was a wise man walking down the beach one morning when the sun was coming up. And in the distance, he saw this, what looked like to be a young man dancing along the beach. And as he got closer, he realized that the young man was picking up starfish and throwing them back in the water. And when he got close enough to speak to him, he said, young man, what are you doing? He said, well, the sun's coming up, the tide's out, these starfish are going to die if they don't get back in the water. So I'm picking them up and throwing them back in the water. So then he picked up one, threw it back in the water. And the man said, young man, there's miles of beaches and thousands of starfish. You couldn't possibly make a difference. He said, I just made a difference with that one, didn't I? You can make a difference if you want to. Thank you all for listening to me this morning. Glad to be here. Linda, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Anybody got any questions? Well, I'm going to take that minute. I told you enough. Well, thank you all again for being in and allowing me to speak to you.
Mr. Yancey, I can't say thank you enough to you for that. That was not only an excellent story for your life story for the students to hear, to tell them about what is possible in their lives. Because I'm sure that there may be somebody here who works in an entry-level job at a bank who thinks that they will be there forever, that is all that they can ever do. And so your story is inspirational, and I really appreciate it. I want to say thank you for coming today, for speaking, but also for all the things that you do. This man, I always say to him, he is the hardest working retired man in Columbus, Georgia. Yeah, he is absolutely the hardest working retired man. But on behalf of all the students and the faculty, the 1,400 undergraduate students and the 200 plus graduate students of the Turner College of Business, the faculty and the staff, I want to give you this little token of our appreciation for all that you do, and especially for speaking here this morning. Thank you all for coming.